So I think it is worth talking about this again. And of course, we've got to talk about NIMBYs and what NIMBYism is, and then more importantly, how you can spot a NIMBY, and then all more important, I suppose, really is the final point you need to do. How then do you defeat NIMBYs? How do you stop them? Because at the moment, one of the big things we really need to do is we need to build a lot of stuff in the UK. That is undeniable. From infrastructure to housing to, jobs, warehouses, you name it. We need to build a lot of stuff. And ultimately, at the end of the day, NIMBYs will be the biggest blockers to any and all of this stuff. And the typical NIMBY argument basically goes that they are fine with whatever, shall we say, is being proposed, but then it will go, well, why does it have to be there? Don't really like it's there, which is where, of course, the NIMBYs get their name. Remember, NIMBY is an acronym for not in my backyard. And that's why it's called NIMBY. That's why they're called NIMBYs, and it's called NIMBYism. Because even though they may espouse the fact that they are and that they do want this type of infrastructure built, when it comes to, well, actually building the stuff, or where in particular, not in their backyard is and does very, very, very much become primarily their big point. So, before we go more into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. Down, of course, below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one of today's link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So, I suppose the first thing is now you've had a brief introduction to what NIMBYs are. Why should you care, for example, if there are NIMBYs in your council, or, maybe your MP could very well be a NIMBY? Well, go back to what I just said at the moment. One of the biggest things and problems that we face really in the UK is at the moment is we don't have enough infrastructure built, be it rail, roads, transport infrastructure, sewage, reservoirs, etc. You name it, needs to be built. At some point, you have to build it. You just can't get away with not building stuff. And we saw this really in a lot of the past 14 years of Conservative government. A lot of them were NIMBYs. The whole reason why Cameron went and put a big moratorium on offshore wind farms, well, ruins my view. Ruins the view, and that's it. And the other, of course, classic view is environmental concerns. And I'm going to say it because it's true. A lot of Green councillors are probably the biggest NIMBYs there are out there. And it is the classic NIMBY tactic to always cite environmental concerns or demand environmental studies, basically to, well, play for time. One of the biggest NIMBY tricks is to play for time. Sometimes they know no matter what they do, they are not going to stop this particular project from happening. However, if they drag it out, if they keep on putting blockers in the way, in the road, like demanding environmental studies or an environmental impact assessment, when many times these impact assessments have already been done, then they can drag it out. They can basically kill a project, be it for rail, infrastructure, roads, you name it. You look up into North Yorkshire and the desperate need to expand some of the dual carriageways we've got into like 3 lanes has been killed for years because, well, predominantly because, oh, well, if we expand it into 3, then surely that'll mean more traffic, right? But the problem is you've already got 2 lanes that are already over capacity, which then itself creates more traffic problems. And then again, you would think maybe they would be advocating for more public transport in rail or something like that, so more people can visit York. Oh, can't have that. Can't have that. A couple of years ago, there was an idea to build a tram network in York, got killed by the NIMBYs because the NIMBYs argued and had it die a death because they kept on demanding more and more impact assessments. NIMBYs will always try, if they know that a project is going to be built or that they can't stop it initially, then they will drag it out and try to die a death. And the big problem is that people need to call that out. And they need to go into local councils, they need to go into local planning stuff, but they need to know, for example, that there is already an environmental impact assessment, that this is what this particular environmental impact itself says about this area or about this environment, what stuff already says. So it's a lot of work. It is a lot of paperwork, that homework you have to do. You have to be able to walk into those meetings and go, hold on a second, councillor so and so, you've said this, or that you're asking for an environmental impact assessment. Well, one was already done with the initial proposal of this project, and it says this, this, and this. That's what you have to do. That's what you have to be prepared for. And then also it knows knowing where those documents are. So another thing you have to sort of be aware of, freedom of information requests. Be aware that if you are, or that a project is going to be good, because many of you are probably sitting under some of you may be under reform councils, and of course we've seen them say, well, for net zero stuff, etc., we're going to try and block it. We're not going to allow that stuff to happen. These are the type of things you've got to fight. This is the type of freedom of information request you've got to put in all this type of stuff, argue for it, and then ultimately, eventually, when it comes around to election time, just hammer these people saying, we're going to do this project, this project, and this project. This is why it would have been good for, for the town, for the region, etc., wherever you might happen to be. And you stopped it time and time again. This is what we could have had, could have been built, could have been providing X amount of jobs, could have provided this, could have meant this. And then you hammer them on that when it comes to election time. And that is generally the only really way to really beat NIMBYs, or to hope that, the project can survive the dragging out, because tends to be the biggest killer. NIMBYs know sometimes that if they can just drag the project out, then they can just kill it. Death by slow evisceration. But be aware, and there are of course many more NIMBY tactics out there. It's probably worth going into more NIMBYs and tactics maybe in a future video at some point. But it is very much worth you knowing about these people, what they are, initially how to sort of beat them. But it does require a heck of a lot of homework, to do. Reading environmental impact studies, knowing the information on that to be able to combat them, going to the council meetings in the first place, and like I say, going to council planning meetings. It can be whenever. They can be in the midday. You might be at work. You might not be able to attend. So it's informing other people that might be able to attend what they need to say, how they need to say it. It can be an uphill battle, and some NIMBYs have got this down to an absolute fine art, a very fine art. But as always, maybe I'll try and find an example from my local council, because I know there are a few that I could pull, which would be interesting to see. And I wonder if I think one of them might have been filmed, but maybe we'll try and find that first before we do it. So as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, let me know what you think down below in the comments. Hit the like, hit the share button on your way out. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.